Let's talk about the open source firewall pfSense. Why pfSense firewalls? It's built on a very solid FreeBSD platform, currently on FreeBSD 10.1. Runs on standard white box hardware. It's very configurable, customizable, and can be completely managed from a web interface. You also have full command line access, nothing hidden, all access to everything in there. Enterprise features such as VPN, CARP, failover, QoS, third-party plugin support. There's an entire framework so people can write third-party plugins and add-ons to the system. Commercial support available, so if you work in corporate IT or purchasing and you want something that's fully supported with contracts and incident support, that is available from pfSense. The install system is really simple. There's two versions. I'm going to be covering the full version of pfSense, but there's also a nano version. So if you want to run this just off of a thumb drive, there's a special install for thumb drives as well that doesn't write the log files persistently to the thumb drive. So it's nice for building a small home system. Like I said, this is the full version right here. Really straightforward on the install. I did it in VirtualBox to run through this real quick. By default, when you start it up, it'll ask if it finds if it finds pfSense previously installed, it can recover it. So if you break a pfSense box, it can actually go in and use this to use it as a recovery system as well. The default configurations are perfectly fine. Change video formats, key map if you need to. There's a lot of different country codes. Anything that's supported in FreeBSD 10.1 should all be in here. The quick and easy install, I highly recommend. You can customize everything once you get in there. But if you do want to do a custom install, there are options for everything from RAID to custom partition configurations that you could do inside of there. Also, it's got the rescue, the config XML, or even push an XML in there while you're doing the install from a previous config. Let's say if you had one that had a hard drive crash, you just want to rescue it. Run through the easy install here. It's a lot of next and yes. You get a little bar going across telling you when it's done. It doesn't take long to install. At the end, you got the choice of a standard kernel or embedded kernel with no VGA console or keyboard access. You can lock these down so there is no VGA console at all, and it can push it through the serial port on like an embedded box, for example. We're just going to use a standard VGA kernel. Once done, you reboot. It reminds you upon reboot that the default username, default password is admin and pfSense. Then once booted, you see the IP addresses assigned on the WAN and LAN. I didn't go through all this, but it's kind of neat. If you didn't have them assigned or didn't have the networks plugged in and you wanted to set them, you can set them from the interface here. And what it does when you go to set each one, as you plug them in, it assumes that is the one you want to use. So it makes it easy to find if you have like 4 or 5 different NICs in the system for advanced configurations. You can also, from here, if you forget the web password, reset it, or just reset the whole system to factory default. Then once we go to the web interface, standard, right here's where we log in, admin and pfSense. Run through the wizard, start all the configuration. First thing it asks you is you want to support the project, but with a pfSense Gold subscription. This gives you access to the full manual and a few more features. They also, from here, you can start going with the incident support options and things like that in here. Set the name, host name and domain. By default, it's going to have a time server in there. Just choose your time zone to match with your location. Then it wants to know how you want to set up the WAN interface. Now, if you have multiple static IPs, you only set the first static IP in here. So when you're building this out, if it's static, it's sometimes a little confusing because you don't set all your IP addresses up at the beginning. You just set the first IP address up, and later you add the rest of them in under alias. Also supports PPoE if you're using, for example, a older style DSL or cable modem where it needs the PPoE login. That's an option on here. Set your LAN IP address and subnet for this. Change the password. Reload the config, and you're in. First thing you're presented with is a dashboard. The dashboard is customizable. You can go through here and add different features, add options to the dashboard, things you want to see when you first log in, which even include the smart status, service status, system information, wake on LAN, or traffic graphs. Once you've added these, you just click the save settings and it becomes permanent. Then you can actually drag these around and rearrange them if you want. All the default system under admin access are fine right out of the box. By default, you can have up to two people logged in at once. The web configuration does default to HTTPS with a self-signed certificate that it generates. It by default has web GUI redirect, so when you type in the LAN IP address, it starts on port 80 and then redirects you to the SSL port. You can also play with some of the advanced settings, firewall optimization options, all the other advanced details in here. Still, like I said, out of the box works perfectly fine. One thing I do change when I set these up is I like NAT reflection, and the NAT reflection option is right in here. This pure NAT option allows it, if you're not familiar with NAT reflection, it's so you can take a website for a web server that's internal, and when you're inside the same network, you can still get there. We use OwnCloud at my office, and this makes it nice because I put the full URL for OwnCloud in there. Whether my laptop's inside or outside the office, I don't have to change anything with the NAT reflection because it sees the reflection option and just redirects it internally. There are options to push notifications via PHP Growl. It's another option to so you can integrate this with other monitoring systems in your around your network. SMTP notifications, you can set up an email server, port email, so you can have this notify you of any issues. Users menu. By default, you have a admin in here. You can disable admin and create a new one to keep it more secure and locked down. Once you've created another administrator, it'll allow you to log in as that new admin and disable the original admin. Each user is defined here, and you have fine-grained control over their group memberships, which you can build groups for. You have effective privileges, so you can give them access only to the parts of the system you want. And it's got a really simple menu. Just go through, choose the different areas where you want them to have access to. There's also the option when you're adding these to allow access to all pages but deny write to the page. So you can have another person who can let go through and see everything in the system, but then it has denied write access for them, so they can only look. You can also generate internal keys and certificates for each user, and what this allows you to do is these certificates are pulled in. For example, if you use the OpenVPN firewall, and with the OpenVPN firewall you can give each user their own certificate, so you have all the factors of authentication. So you've got the username, password, and certificate they need in order to get in. I'm going to cover that later. Local database is the default out of the box setup. There are options for LDAP and Radius servers, so if you have an enterprise system you want to integrate the access rights into, that's absolutely possible. Here's where you create the groups. You can create a group of just people who can see the web, just people who can see this, or a group of admins from here, and then just apply the groups easier without having to go through the fine-grained parts of the permissions. Loading updates. When I started this system, it was 2.2.1. 2.2.2 became available. So really simple. We go through, it says update available on the dashboard, and you go to the auto update. There's an option here to perform a full backup prior to upgrade. Definitely click that if you got plenty of space on a hard drive. It's not that big, it only takes up a couple gigs. Runs through the update, does it all in place. While it's loading the update, which generally doesn't take very long if you have a faster machine, the firewall keeps routing traffic because everything's pushed in memory, but it will not let you go through and start modifying or configuring things while it's pushing the update. So it minimizes the amount of downtime, and only downtime really is while it's rebooting, but keeps your system up and running and routing traffic. This is what it shows on the VGA client side, so you can watch it as it runs through the update. Spelling out everything that it's done. It doesn't do it silently, so you can even watch as it reinstates all the packages that are on here. Upon reboot, the system's available, but like the add-ons are not immediately available, so it takes a few minutes while it reloads in these add-ons. It's doing that too because sometimes when you go from version to version, some of the add-ons may or may not be supported as a new version came out, and it just will not load those ones. After a few minutes, it's all done, and here's the option to restore the full backup. So the full backup's only 1.2 gig. You could delete, download, or just roll back and restore. And you're not just restoring settings, you're rolling backwards the entire system. And it'll collect these in here. Once you're done and you feel as though the system's fine with the new version, you can always delete these to free up space. With the backup restore, you can download the full configuration. By default, it does not want to add the RRD data, which is all the data logs, which is fine because it's going to add quite a bit to the config.xml. You can encrypt this file if you want, add a password to it. You can also tell it to back up the system but not back up package information as in the third-party add-ons. Whenever I do a backup, I generally do a full backup because if I only want to restore one specific piece of the system, it gives you fine-grained restore control. For example, if you wanted to download a configuration, you've somehow messed up the firewall rules, and you go, man, I only want to restore that, no problem. Just choose the firewall rules. You can grab the XML file, pull just the firewall rules out of it using this, and restore those. No reboot required. It just instantly applies the settings. There's also at the bottom an option just to reinstall the packages if you're having any problems with the third-party add-ons. It'll just run through and rerun their setups. There is also a config history. The default count is 30 or 5 as it says on NanoBSD. You can then update and change this if you have quite a bit of space. It tells you how much space all the backups are using. For each one of these, it's got a history and kind of gives you an idea of what you did as you installed things. You can also pick any two of them and do a diff, and it diffs the two config.xml files so you can see what changes were made. At the bottom here, you can see like a firewall was changed from 192.168.1.22 over to 192.168.9. So you can actually go through here and look, and then because it's all in XML, it's fairly human readable to go through and figure out what was changed if you want to look at the differences. Once you choose any one of those backups, you just hit confirm, and it applies all the settings from that restore. Firewall and NAT. Here is the NAT port forward system, and we're just going to start here because it's got an option to create linked rules on the firewall side. So for any rule, you can, by default, the rule is going to be enabled, but you can disable this rule. You can also choose the interface, protocol, source, any source by default, or you can say specific IP addresses, so you can have this rule be very restricted, both on only certain networks or certain areas can come through this port. Then you have the different addresses, and I have the WAN address, which was set up, and then I added 2 alias addresses. Now you get to name them. I called it second and third WAN address. You can really call these whatever you want. So if you have multiple IP addresses, you can give each one of them a name to make it easier for you when you're setting up the firewall rules. So you can say which port, which IP address this NAT rule needs to listen on. Then you set the destination port range. Just out of habit, I type the port number because I find it faster than scrolling through, but you can choose all the predefined services, SMTP web. If it's not defined, it'll just simply say other. You'll see how it automatically changes that later. Redirected IP is the internal IP address where you want this port 80 to land on, and redirected target port. Now when you have a port range going, all you need to do on the redirected target port is put the first port, and it'll figure out the rest. So if the redirected port range was 80 to 100, you just still have to put 80 under the redirected target port, and it'll fill in the blanks for the other one. You don't have to add that in there. Or if you were doing redirected target port and you bring a different port range starting from 80 to 100, and you wanted this 100, it'll go from 100 to 120 on the redirected target port. Then you have a description for my internal web server. NAT reflection, if it's turned on, which how we did in the beginning, use system defaults perfectly fine. Or you can actually say specifically for this firewall, don't use NAT reflection on this rule. Also, add associated filter rule. That's important. Leave these on. This will automatically create an entry in the firewall table to allow that traffic to pass on that IP address. Once you're done adding any of the firewall configurations, apply changes comes up, and that runs through and reloads the queue. That actually applies all the settings. So you can have all these in there, and until you apply the changes, they're not actually pushed into being active and the service is added. Also, you can see the linked rule in there where you've got the 2 little lines on there. So the linked rule part here is going to show you that there's a rule on the firewall side associated with it. Once the firewall has been reloaded, it actually has a page that monitors the filter reloads. Imagine if you had a slow system, it would take a long time. By the time you even click that on any faster system, all the firewall rules are reloaded. Imagine if you had a very long list of firewall rules, it may take a little longer to load. Now if you want to take a look at these rules again, there's also a system in here by which it figures out which admin changed it. So you can see at the bottom here, it says firewall created by admin right here on this date, updated by admin on this day. If for each user, we put that user and what IP address they logged in from, so it gives you tracking. So if you created the rules and the rule got changed later and you want to know who changed it, the system documents under each rule that person's username and IP address and time date they changed any of the rules or updated them. And you can see up here at the top that it's changed over to HTTP instead of just putting 80 in there. Now on the firewall rules themselves, here is the My Internal Web Server 80. This is the linked rule that was created. And you can see that it's grayed out under source, advanced, singular, alias. The reason it does this is because anything you change on the NAT rule is actually going to be reflected in here. So you don't want to break the two. You can not create the automatic rule, which would be more complicated because you'd have two separate rules you have to manage. If you want to change things, you'd have to then create information on the firewall rules. This saves you the trouble of the two-step process. Also, when you're looking at the firewall rules, the option to view the NAT rule is right here. Lets you go right back to where you started. So if you want to know from either side, you can get back to the linked rule. There's a lot of advanced features under the firewall system, which even includes Source OS. It uses an Nmap style fingerprinting, which allows you to see how the OS incoming and then create a firewall rule based on that. Big list on here, like I said, I believe it's based off of the same one that you find in Nmap. It's as accurate as OS detection is, which is it's pretty reasonably accurate. Kind of a novel feature, being able to create a firewall rule based on that. You also have a lot of other advanced options, state entries, match packet on marketplace. Lots of really detailed you can get in here if you have something very specific. Maximum new connections per host per second for TCP. So you can really get into some fine-grained control on one single rule, or you can leave it all at default. Here's under virtual IP addresses where I added the second and third WAN address. Really simple to add these. Simply type them in, the network address, whether it's a single address, whether it's IP, which interface those addresses are tied to, because you can tie them to the WAN or the LAN and start adding multiple addresses, and away you go. The traffic shaping is really extensive on this and really, really nice. Gives you a lot of rules for traffic shaping. You can create all the rules by hand, and that would be difficult. I really recommend using the wizard. The wizard's very thorough, and once you've created with the wizard, it's no problem to go back in and edit all the details under the rule sets. There's a couple different wizards, one for multiple LAN WAN, dedicated links. When you set this up, the wizard will guide you through the pfSense traffic shaping. Be aware that custom bandwidth should not exceed 30% of the interface link bandwidth. Keep this in mind during the wizard. I have one LAN, one WAN, and I'm going to explain some of this here next. You choose on the WAN side what the upload and download speed for the circuit. We have an 11 meg 50 here. So we put in 1150, and what this does is so the system understands how much bandwidth could potentially be available on the WAN, and then from here it's going to ask me percentages, so I can say I want to allow only a percentage of the bandwidth. Well, they need to know what the total bandwidth is so they can control the percentage of it against the bandwidth. So when you're doing this, you can get very fine-grained. If you're using VoIP in your office, and we are, for example, you put in your upstream SIP server, prioritize all the voice over IP traffic. This is great, so you can completely keep your phones isolated if you have a lot of traffic on your network, but of course phones are really important. You can't have your traffic jittering on the phones. You put this in, it's going to absolutely prioritize that traffic over the other traffic and keep the voice system rolling. This is great because even BitTorrent traffic can be shaped in here, all the P2P traffic. You can control the bandwidth for a catch-all, which BitTorrent traffic can be a little bit hard to identify if it's some of the more obscure ones. You can say only allow it percent or kilobytes per second or bytes with the pull downs there, so you can allocate a certain amount of bandwidth with a catch-all. You can also go through each one of these and say only manage the BitTorrent traffic. You can do it for all eDonkey, Fast Track, Nutella. There's a big list of them here that are in there as options. You can also raise the priority of gaming traffic to higher than most traffic. This is kind of fun in a home network. So you can say, even take like the PlayStation system or Steam, Wii consoles, Xbox, prioritize that traffic over other traffic. So you could actually keep your torrents running and keep your games running at the same time. It actually has a long list of games in here as well, Battlefield and whatnot. This will also raise the priority of other protocols, other network traffic. For example, PC Anywhere, VNC, Apple Remote Desktop, AIM, FaceTime, ICQ. You can reprioritize those. Google Hangouts is nice because if you're doing a lot of Hangouts and you want to have the system prioritize that so there's no problems there, no problem. You can choose that to a higher priority. If you're using Remote Desktop, you can prioritize that so that way any remote desktop connections don't get affected by traffic on your network. You can also prioritize VPN traffic across your network, either PPTP or IPsec. You can also do iTunes, MP3s, web priority, email. If you have a mail server and you want to make sure it gets more bandwidth, you can do that. Some of the Steam downloader and BattleNet downloader is supported. Also has like Crash Plan, Apple Mobile Sync. A lot of options in here. Once it's done, traffic shape, hit finish. It'll apply all of your rules. Then from here, you can go through and start going in all the detail for like the games I had chose or any of the other options in here, and then drill down to a lot of detail. You can also just remove the shaper altogether. So it's completely customizable. Even though you ran the wizard, anything in here can go back and be edited. If you want to do something really simple, you can go to the limiter. I created a rule called test limit in and test limit out. I actually set them both the same to limit the bandwidth to 512. Now, whenever you create a traffic limit in the limiter, it doesn't do anything to the firewall unless you apply it to a firewall rule. You can apply it to a blanket rule like all in, all out for one specific LAN, or you can apply it to something like just port 80 traffic. So you could actually limit, if you have a web server in turn, you can force a limit on the bandwidth that the web server is allowed to use, or any other service. You do this under advanced, under the in and out. So I got the test limit in, test limit out, both set to 512. And then from here, I set it to the LAN, and stars all the way across means all traffic, so I had applied this to the LAN rule in general. Also, you see the little A next to this rule, and this little A lets you know that there's an advanced setting on this rule. So that way you know which rule it is, which rules have advanced settings. And here was the traffic speeds before the rule, 56, 11.5. After the rule, 0.51, 0.52. So it instantly applied the rule to it, no problem. DHCP server. The DHCP service can be standard. You set your standard ranges. You can also add multiple pools. So you can say, I need from this range to this range, and then this range to this range. So you can build different pool areas on there. You can also deny unknown clients. So it will only give out addresses to the people you have predefined in the registers or with their MAC addresses. You have all the other options, static ARP, time format change. So there's a lot of little options in here. You also have TFTP servers, NTP servers, and network booting. We use network booting in my office, and this is nice. You can specify what the TFTP server you want is, and some of the network booting options within there, and which file, which PXE Linux 0 is the one we're using. So you can list all of these little details right in here to get it set up. This is nice. A lot of DHCP servers do not have this feature, and you have to drop to the command line on some of the other firewalls I've seen and manually add them in, which is kind of a pain in the butt. Once done, you can see all the DHCP leases on the log page. Then there's a plus next to any one of those leases. That allows it to become a static lease. That simple. From there, it'll let you fill out all the different details. It'll also let you copy your MAC address. This shows up a few spots in pfSense where you can just hit copy MAC address, and it copies the MAC address of your system. Then you have client identifier, IP address you want assigned, netboot file name, root path. It'll actually even let you, on a per client basis, push different DNS servers or win servers, or even a gateway to each thing it finds on the network. And all the other rules with specifying TFTP server and TP server still apply. So you could actually set up network boot and specify multiple servers by adding static entries. Captive portal, really neat feature built right into the system. So we're going to start here, and this has a wizard as well that makes it really easy to do. It's not too hard to do manually, but the wizard makes it simple and then customize later. So we're just going to create one called Zone 1, description, you shall not pass. And what this is going to do is run through the captive portal settings. Set it up on your LAN interface. If you have multiple LAN interfaces, for example, if you have a business and you have a restaurant, you want to create a secondary LAN where you have the captive portal applied to, so you can have people who have to log in or get a password from you and don't just get free internet access. This is an option where this would be used, or like in a hotel or any other environment where you want to delegate it out. We've actually put this in schools and set up systems so that kids have to have a password in order to get on the internet. They can get onto the network for local access, but have to get on through the captive portal to actually get out to the internet. For each one of these, you can choose how many concurrent connections per client, idle timeout, hard timeout. So you can say exactly 30 minutes after they log in, they're forced to log out, which will bring up the login page. An after authentication URL, and a blocked MAC address URL, so you can customize this. By default, it automatically supports redirect, so if they're not logged into the captive portal, they try to go to google.com, it'll redirect them to the captive portal, they enter a username and password, and then it redirects them back to wherever they were heading, which would in that case be Google. This got an option for automatic pass-through MAC additions under certain conditions. You can also create, without going into the Firewall QoS system, a per user bandwidth restriction. So any of the users that log in through the captive portal, you can set their bandwidth options. The other things are you can use by default the local user manager or vouchers for the login, and we'll cover vouchers in a minute, or you can federate the access through Radius. You can force it to HTTPS using the self-signed certificate, or you can import other certificates in here. Portal page contents, you can customize how the portal page looks. The default will work. It's just a generic, username and password that comes up, but you can copy and paste this form here and integrate it into your own custom form, upload it, and have a completely customized landing page with your company logo or however you want to put it on there with the information. This is what the default pfSense captive portal looks like, just username and password. Once it's done, for each person who's authenticated, you can see their username, start session, last activity seen, and MAC address. From here, you can actually just go and edit and add their MAC addresses, for example, to put them on a permanent list. The school, for example, all the teachers, their MAC addresses automatically are in here. The teachers never see the captive portal, but all the students do. And this is just the entry for it. You can force block a MAC address or force pass a MAC address, and you can bypass the bandwidth restrictions by leaving it at 0 for no bandwidth restrictions, or set per user bandwidth restrictions to this. The voucher system is really neat. Let's say you have a coffee shop, for example, and you wanted to give out a custom digit for each of your customers, and that would allow them access through the firewall for some allotted amount of time. You can control how long each ticket would last for, let's say an hour, and then you create these ticket numbers. Each one you give, they have 1 hour access. When their 1 hour access is up, it brings them back to the captive portal page, and it needs a new voucher number. The default character set is set down here, so you have all the default characters that we use to generate the vouchers, so you can choose a custom character set to make it easier. It already has a couple things avoided, like 0, as you see, is not in here, and O is not here, so you don't have people confused when they do it. It does have option to set up an external voucher database and sync port, so this could probably be integrated, let's say, for example, into a point of sale system or some other way with some scripting. When you want to create the vouchers, I just created one. I called the comment 1,000 tickets. Roll number 1, I set it to 60 minutes per ticket, and I want 1,000 tickets. Once you create it, you see the voucher rolls right here, 1,000 tickets, minutes a ticket, and then you have a little I for information here. And what that does is let you download this as a CSV file. And here's all the ticket numbers all incremented out, and there's 1,000 of them here. You could just, for example, have these behind the counter and just give them out to people, but each one of these represents a 60-minute block of time that people would have, and once the tickets are expired, they're expired. You can just go back into the system and recreate several of these sheets, as many as you want. Also, at the end of the captive portal zone, there's a file manager. What the file manager allows you to do is, obviously you need more than just the web interface. You can, because they don't have external access, you can upload the files that you need, so it comes through and you customize there, and you can see it gives you briefly how to do it and set up the image sources to customize the graphics on the captive portal page. Dynamic DNS. Lots of services are supported for dynamic DNS, so if you're doing this from home and you've got a rotating IP address, there's a lot of them in here, and you can add as many as you want of these for each one on here. So you choose the interface to monitor, choose all the different ones such as zone edit, self-host, and you can add them in there to get your dynamic DNS working. Here's some of the packages that I have installed on here that I'll show. NTOP, OpenVPN Client Export Utility, Snort, IFTop, and DarkStat. These are all really slick, easy to install on a package manager. The way you put a package in, you go to the system, go to packages. Here's all the packages. You can just scroll through here. If you want any of them installed, you just click the plus. They install really quickly. They're all checked and installed and pulled through pfSense, so they're not being pulled from third-party websites. pfSense validates each one of these packages. Click confirm to install the package. It runs through, downloads, configures, and set this up. And anything that needs, any dependencies it needs, it just puts them all in. There's really nothing you need to do to get these to work. Once the packages are installed, you'll see the list of them right here. Now, if any of the packages have an update, the update does not update them with the updater. You have to look at the installed packages, and you would just click on the package name itself, and it has an option to update to the latest version of that package. I have Snort installed in this. By default, I set it up on the WAN, of course. Real straightforward, run through the setup on here. Snort is a great utility for keeping an eye on things and intrusion detection, and it does easily support, just with a checkbox, to block offenders. I have it set up so it automatically blocks any unusual attacks that come in through here. It has a rule set update. If you have a purchase version of the Snort rules, you can have set up your username and password and download the ones. I'm just using the Snort GPL community rule and emergency threat rules. It automatically updates. I have it set to update every 12 hours. Real straightforward, real simple, very automated system. Plus has lots of customization in here. Here's a quick look at the alerts for the different ones that are coming through and the attacks that are coming through. Scan. You can see the type of protocol attacks. You can see the general description of the attack. You can click I to resolve the address on there. It tells you when the attack comes through, the priority. You can download all the log files. You can set it to auto refresh, show filtering options. And here's the block list I have set up. So automatically when these IP addresses come and scan, I have them blocked by default for an hour. And for each one of them, when you click on the little blue, it does a resolve. This is actually kind of interesting. This company scans me a lot, and it turns out that if you go to census.shodan.io, Shodan.io is a scanner to find open webcams and open systems that have default passwords. So it actually just goes out on the internet scanning them and creates an index of them that you can go through and list. Kind of a neat service I found by watching them scan my system so much, looking for open ports. NTOP. NTOP is nice. It shows up under the diagnostics menu once you do the install, and you can set the NTOP admin password. This is something that they don't have in the description. If you don't set the password, it doesn't work. So you do have to go in here, set the password, not just go right to NTOP. Choose the interfaces you want. It's a scan. I chose my LAN, LAN 2, and WAN. And then it gives you all the traffic information for them. So it breaks down IP addresses inside your domain. You can sort by data, sort by TCP, IC, and PMP. Most all the NTOP features. The only downside is under pfSense, somewhere a few versions ago, they broke the RRD graphs that were real fancy in NTOP, which is unfortunate. But this all works. Just the graphing doesn't work in here quite like it should. There's some type of font system. There's a lot of talk in the forums about fixing it. No one's really got around to fixing it. It will break down so you can look at top talkers by hour. Great when you're trying to trace out where the noise is coming from on your network. If you have a larger network, trying to figure out who's pulling too much bandwidth. So it breaks down in kilobits, for example, here by hour for each segment. IF top. This is a command line option, so you can install it, go to your SSH into your system, drop to your shell, and you can use IF top to watch from the command line the top talkers. It's the same IF top that's available for FreeBSD. It just drops it onto the command line through the package installer. So you can see the different IP addresses where they're talking to, and in real time watch this update. For example, I kicked off a lookup for doing the speed test on Comcast, and you can see it's polling right here, 38 megs, 46 megs, 42 with 11 total. So it actually can give you these real-time statistics so you can watch what's going on your network, and once again go back to doing some tracing on there. DarkStat does the same thing, but it does it right through the web interface. Choose what you want it to watch: LAN, LAN 2, WAN. Access DarkStat. These graphs will roll and move in real time, and it's kind of nice, so you can just watch your bandwidth usage go up and down. You can see and sort each IP address to figure out how much bandwidth each one's using. Sort by in, out, total, look at the MAC address and IP address of that bandwidth, and then for each one it lets you click on them and you can see the total type of services that we're using, grouped by protocol, UDP, TCP, and with totals next to each one of them. And it works for the external IP addresses, so you can see how much SSL traffic, for example, went to this IP, which is actually our ring central for our phones. VPN support. I love the VPN support that's built into pfSense. The open VPN is great. So it does cover IPsec, L2P, PPTP. It does give you a warning if you go to PPTP that it's been compromised and is no longer secure. By default, it wants to use your local user database, but it does support LDAP and Radius for VPN authentication. You can add your own CAs, or you can do self-sign-in. I created my own certificates. And I did these. You do these in the beginning in the Cert Manager, where you can just create your own certificates for the system. Run through the wizard here and select WAN, UDP. I called it Test VPN. The wizard's very handy anywhere on the system where it's available. It'll set all those default settings to make everything work, and the default settings are secure. And you can easily, without breaking anything, after you set it up with the wizard, go back and choose this. So this ran through the wizard here to set this up. This is one of the pages. You set your tunnel network, whether or not you want to force all client traffic through the tunnel, local network, concurrent connections. So if you want unlimited, or you say, this server only has so much bandwidth, I don't want more than 5 people logging in at a time. Compression preferences, type of service, interclient communication, if you want even the VPN people to be able to see each other. And allow duplicate connections. Probably not needed. There's not really too many scenarios I think of where you do, because it'll kill out one that sees the client's gone and create a new session for them. So you don't really want them to be able to log in twice. You can push different default domains, DNS servers, NTP servers over the network. So when you're assigning the IP address via the VPN, it gives you all these custom options. These are checked by default, and I highly recommend them. Firewall rule. Add a rule to permit connections to the VPN server process from clients anywhere on the internet, anywhere on the internet, and also add an open VPN rule to allow traffic from connected clients pass through the VPN tunnel. If you don't do it with the wizard and you forget to do this, you end up like me, pulling your hair out going, I thought I knew what I was doing, but then I didn't realize I forgot to create a firewall rule so I could connect with the VPN, but it wasn't routing traffic. And you can see from the system here, it's all set up. You've got disabled no, UDP. You can set up multiple VPNs on here, so you can actually set up different VPNs per different WAN interface on here, for example, is another option. You would just run through the wizard again, it would add another one. Client export. Now this is one of the packages that I showed on the system. I was confused when I first said it because I was looking for it in the menus. It's not in the menus. It adds a tab directly to the OpenVPN. This is one of my favorite plugins for pfSense because it makes life so much easier when we deploy these at clients. What this will do is create a client export. And for example, I put mine and my wife's name in here, and really easy, I can download a Windows XP 32 or 64 or Windows 7 on up, or Vista 7, Windows 8. I've not tried it with Windows 10, but as I understand it works. You have an x86 and x64 version, and it downloads the entire packaged installer with the security certificates, because as we showed in the user side, you can create a security certificate per user. This actually creates the entire bundle with it in there. So when you run the install, it's a single executable that you're going to run on a Windows machine that does everything for you. It's going to set it up, it's going to put the gateway in, it's going to put the VPN, it's going to put the VPN's keys in, and it will put the user's keys in. So you don't have to go through and figure out how to get all these things on there and set up. So it literally takes your setup, you copy this to a thumb drive, you put it on the client's laptop, and you have them completely connected to the VPN, generally in under 5 minutes. The installer, really just a standard Windows installer using the OpenVPN software. Straightforward, next and yes, and it puts all certificates in, and then you're done. They can log in. It does still ask them for their username and password without the option to save, which I really like. There is a way, if you change the settings in OpenVPN, to say they only need a certificate, and then you could control the users by certificate revocation. That's another option too if you just want them to connect without having to use a password. I prefer the combination of certificate and username password, so that way if you disabled an employee, for example, they wouldn't be able to log in with someone else's because they wouldn't have that person's matching certificate installed on their system. Extra layer of security when you're talking about people getting access to your internal network. Once it's done, in the status page you can see that they're logged in. You can force them to log out, bytes received. And here is the firewall rules for OpenVPN. The default rule it created was they can see everything. And we call it OpenVPN test. It tells you that this firewall rule at the end of the description was created with the wizard. But then you can go in here and start all the controls. So let's say you have a remote contractor and you only want him to have access to one single IP address. You could filter that right through here. You could get through and do all the fine-grained rules and controls just like you can on any of the other firewall sides. Diagnostics pages. There are a lot of different diagnostics options in here. So you do not have to go to the command line. You can sit here in the web interface and take a look at everything, which is really nice. You can take a look at the ARP tables, the NDP tables for IPv6. This is a complete IPv6 compatible system. Testing user authentication. I like this. This is a nice system. If someone says my username and password is not working, you don't want to open up another window to even log in and try it. And this will authenticate whether it's a local database or external databases such as Radius or LDAP. Put the username and password in here, hit test. It'll give you what the response is on the system for it. Execute a command. You can actually just push something right to the command line, download a file, upload a file, or execute special PHP code on the system. This function is unsupported. Use at your own risk, as it says. Yes, because you can break the system with it. But if you wanted to just have some command that you wanted to push to reset something, you could put this in here. Put this in there. Diagnostic DNS lookup. If you want to know how the system sees it and the DNS servers you have listed, type it in. It also allows you to create an alias. The firewall system, I didn't get in detail with it, but it does have an alias system in it. So you could do this, create aliases to add to the firewall rules without having to type in it every time. Ping and trace route are supported in here as well. It does have a file editor, so you could go load and browse through anything you want here and find a file and edit it without having to go to the command line. Factory reset. You just want to blow the system away and restore it to factory fresh. Just go here to factory defaults and hit yes. PF top, but you can run from the command line, but it'll actually run through, and this updates in real time. Number of states, sort by bytes, view speed. So all your general options, you can do these and change, so you can go through and start tracing things out. Show states. It shows all the different connections and the state that they're in. This is nice too because it gives you the option to reset all the states. So you can just push and reset all connections on there. So if you wanted to create a traffic rule and apply it, and then you go, I just want to clear all the states and watch them rebuild, gives you that option. Diagnostics packet capture. You can capture the WAN, LAN, or any of the other interfaces, the specific protocol, a specific host, a specific port, a specific packet length, count, level of detail, and lookups. This is nice because what it does is you can create a large PCAP file, then download it and use another external packet analyzer to really try to trace out some of the traffic on your network because you were looking for something or wanted to see something. It does save it to the hard drive. You don't want to leave it on too long because obviously you could fill up. But if you, it's nice because it gives you some fine-grained tracing options right into the firewall. Of course, because all traffic's passing through it, it can grab it. It gives you all that level of detail that you're looking for when you're trying to trace something out. It'll give you the brief of it on the packets captured and information you can scroll through. And like I said, there's the download button where you can download it and import it into whatever packet capture analyzing tool you have. Diagnostic and smart monitoring tools. It will give you health, smart, or all information for each of the devices. If you're running this on a standard hard drive, view the smart test errors or abort some of the tests if you've set up a long test on it. And it tells you whether or not it's passed, and you can break down all the detail inside of there. System status. Lots of different statuses for all the interfaces, gateway, filters, DHCP leases. See all the running services. I do like that each of them, you can start and stop the service from here, or you can go to the services pages, or even the log entry pages on there. So if you look at a service that's not running or has an error, you can jump right to its configuration page, or you can jump right to its log page and start doing diagnostics on there, or start and stop the service as needed. System logs. You can go through and all the details for any of the logs for any of the systems on there. Firewall, system status, OpenVPN logs. The firewall logs are really cool. You've got a couple options in here that are nice. So as you're watching the traffic, and you can have more detailed log entries created under each rule. It can tell you to do like verbose logging on a specific rule. There's also easy rule add to block list and easy rule add to pass as traffic. So let's say you're trying to troubleshoot a connection that someone's trying to make externally into your system. For some reason it's just not coming through. Go through rules, look for the IP address, and go, whoops, I forgot to open up traffic for that. You can actually just hit that rule and it will start allowing traffic to pass just like that. If you're not sure which rule you just clicked on accidentally and created the easy rule, it will go through here and tell you easy rule passed from firewall log to view. So it actually names that it came from the easy rule creation. The interfaces, if you have DHCP, you just need to release and refresh. It tells you the status is up, the MAC, the IP address on there, some little details, packets in and out, collision errors. Same thing on the LAN. You have your standard RRD graphs built in here, so you can take a look at things like processor usage. And they're all standard RRD graphs are broke down for 8 hours, 1 day, 1 week, and so on and so forth, 30 days, 1 year. Same here with the traffic. Look at the WAN, LAN, or multiple option interfaces. Inverse has some of the details broke out down here. You can look at the overall bandwidth, for example, using this to figure out how much bandwidth the network has used over time. You can also look at it from a packet standpoint instead of a traffic standpoint to see how many packets have gone through. You can also do custom, so I can say show me only LAN traffic style inverse and then choose a date range by which I want to know. So I can actually grab and create the graph based on the data and the logs in the system and look at a specific time period on a specific network. Back to the DHCP leases, shows them all which ones are active and online, which ones are offline. Pre-built hardware. Where to buy these? So if you're looking for a solid system for pfSense, they do sell them on there. Each one of these systems are including support. So you can buy some of these firewalls. They got the wattage and recommendations based on network traffic for which one you'd want. The basic units is this VKT40E at $449. It comes with 8 gigs. Assembly, you have some other details. Each one, like I said, comes with warranty and support. If you wanted to build the systems yourself, it is built using standard white box hardware, or you can buy these Netgate boxes. These Netgate boxes are the same boxes that pfSense themselves use. So you can get these systems here and load your own, and they're a lot less expensive. Of course, you're not getting the support contract with them, but honestly, I've never needed it. It's well documented system, and it's nice if you want to save a few dollars and just build it yourself. And if you do need support, you can always pay for it separately. Or you can get Intel Atom boards, for example, are really popular to build these on. There are bandwidth information, but this has no problem, as I understand, routing over a 100 megabit circuit with a standard Atom D2500 board, including running some of the services. The big bandwidth or processor hogs on pfSense become when you have a lot of VPNs. That's when you start needing horsepower to handle all the encryption. And thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm Tom Lawrence, and my contact information is below.